Christmas used to be my favorite day of the year, not for the presents. Honestly, I've always been the kind of person who finds more joy in giving than receiving. I'm Aiden, 27 years old, the quiet one in a loud family. My mom always said I was easygoing. "You never make a fuss," she'd say with that proud little nod, like it was something noble. But lately, I've started to wonder if that was just code for, "You're easy to take advantage of." It wasn't always like this. When I was a kid, Christmas felt magical. The whole family squeezed into our warm living room, lights twinkling, fireplace crackling, everyone laughing too loud over eggnog and stories we'd all heard 1,000 times. But somewhere between me turning into the family's financial safety net and them pretending not to notice, that magic got smothered under the weight of expectations, mostly the ones they had of me. Last year, I paid off my brother Luke's car repairs. The year before that, I covered my aunt's overdue rent just for 1 month, which somehow turned into 12. My sister Clara called me crying when she was short on tuition, and even though I was saving for my own apartment, I wired the money without a second thought. No one ever said thank you. Not really. They just moved on. Like I was some kind of family ATM, available 24/7, no PIN required. I told myself it didn't matter, that I didn't do it for the gratitude. But deep down, I think I hoped, just once, they'd surprise me. Show that they saw me, that they cared, that I mattered as more than a backup wallet. So this Christmas, I decided to go all out. I'd been planning it for weeks. Handmade cards with personal notes, crisp envelopes tucked with cash for each person, not just money, but thoughtful amounts. Enough to clear debt, take a trip, or finally breathe easy. I wrapped each envelope in red silk ribbon, wrote their names in gold ink, and packed them into my bag before heading over to my mom's house. It had snowed the night before, the kind of soft, perfect snowfall that made everything feel quiet and fresh, like maybe this year could actually be different. I told myself not to expect anything, but some small, stupid part of me still hoped. When I walked in, the living room was already chaos. My cousins were tearing through presents, paper flying everywhere. Clara was squealing over her brand new MacBook, a silver one, exactly the kind she'd been dreaming about. "Oh my God, Mom, how did you know?" she gushed. My mom beamed like she'd split atoms to make it happen. Luke unwrapped the newest iPhone, still in shrink wrap. "No way," he yelled, immediately flipping the camera on to film himself. My aunt clapped like it was a game show. Everyone was loud and glowing. I stood in the doorway for a moment, snowflakes melting in my hair, clutching my carefully packed bag like it was something fragile. When it came time for my turn, my mom handed me a small gift bag. It had a bent corner and looked suspiciously familiar. I reached inside and pulled out a white mug. The same mug, in fact, that I'd given her last year. I recognized the tiny chip near the handle. It even still had the faint stain of old coffee in the bottom. "You always say you don't need anything," she said with a smile. "And you never make a fuss." Everyone chuckled politely. No one looked twice. I didn't say anything, just stared at the mug in my hands for a second too long, then set it down gently on the coffee table. My chest felt tight, not angry tight, but disappointed tight. The kind that sneaks in when you realize, slowly, that you're not invisible by accident. You're invisible because it's easier for them that way. I reached into my bag, fingers brushing against the ribbons and envelopes. I pulled them out, fanned them out like a dealer at a card table. The room quieted just a little. "Whoa, what's that?" Clara asked, eyes already sparkling like she knew. "Something I prepared," I said softly, my voice calm. I looked around the room, at the people who leaned on me, borrowed from me, depended on me. My mom was still smiling, like this was some sweet gesture. My aunt was already reaching for hers. That was when I looked down at the envelopes again and quietly slid them back into my bag. A flicker of confusion crossed my mom's face. "What's wrong, honey?" I zipped the bag shut. "Nothing," I said, standing. "Just realized something." I started walking toward the door. My boots squeaked on the floor. I could feel their eyes following me, still not quite understanding. But then I heard it, my aunt's voice, high and sharp. "Wait, where's our gift?" I turned around, the snow drifting in from the open door behind me. "You already got it," I said evenly. "I paid your rent all year." The silence was instant and heavy, like the room had been dunked underwater. Clara jumped up. "Wait, Aiden, hold on, don't be like that." My mom stood too, that overly sweet panic in her voice. "Aiden, come on. You're overreacting. Let's talk about this. But I didn't move. I didn't say a word. Just turned and walked out into the snow. Behind me, I could hear them scrambling. My brother's voice, seriously, dude? My aunt. It's just a mug. Don't make it a big deal. Footsteps. Crunching snow. Breath in the cold air. Someone slipped behind me yelling, "Can we just get a little something, please?" I didn't even turn around. That was when I heard it. A panicked voice calling from the porch, not angry now, but pleading. Then another. And another. And then silence. The snow muffled their voices the further I walked, like the cold itself had decided I'd heard enough. I didn't speed up. I didn't slow down. I just kept moving, one step after the next. Crunch, 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 down the long, ice-slick driveway. My breath came out in clouds, soft and steady. My fingers tightened around the handle of the bag slung over my shoulder, the one still filled with those envelopes, each one a tiny piece of me I'd been ready to give away. My car was parked under a thin sheet of frost at the end of the street. I had barely reached it when I heard someone shout again, this time closer. It was Clara. Her boots were slipping a little as she half ran through the snow, one mitten waving in the air. "Aiden, wait. Just stop for a second." She sounded winded, but more than that, desperate. That tone in her voice used to be all it took to make me drop everything. I'd always been the one who came when she called. The fixer. The good one. I paused, hand on the car door. She caught up, breathing hard. "You don't have to go. Look, I get it. That mug was stupid, okay? I didn't even know Mom did that. We thought you didn't care about this stuff." I turned to face her slowly. Her cheeks were flushed from the cold, but there was no snow on her. Someone had clearly sent her out in a rush, a messenger from the cozy disaster behind us. "Did you really think that?" I asked, my voice low. "That I didn't care?" She looked down. "I mean, you always act like nothing gets to you. Like you're fine." I nodded, more to myself than her. Because if I ever said I wasn't, nobody would have listened anyway. She winced, and for once, didn't argue. Just stood there in the snow, rubbing her hands together, eyes darting to the bag. Were those envelopes really for us? I opened the car door and tossed the bag onto the passenger seat. They were. Her eyes widened. "How much?" "Enough to make your jaw drop," I said flatly. "Enough to make your Christmas easier. To give everyone one good, guilt-free day." Clara stepped forward, reaching for my arm like we were still kids. "Can't you just—" "Look, I'm sorry. We didn't mean to hurt you. Just come back in. At least for dinner." I stared at her hand on my sleeve. It was shaking slightly. Maybe from the cold. Maybe from the realization that something had shifted and it wasn't going back. I gently moved her hand away. "You don't get it, Clara. This isn't about the mug. Or even the presents." "Then what?" she asked, her voice cracking. "It's about how nobody in that house sees me unless they need something. It's about how I've been holding all of you up for years, and today, on the one day I hoped maybe, just maybe, you'd think about me. You gave me a coffee mug you didn't even bother to wash." Tears welled in her eyes, and for a split second, I almost caved. Almost. But then I remembered the birthday they forgot. The time I had the flu and no one called. The jokes about how I was always alone, always working. The quiet expectation that I would pick up the check again and again, with a smile and a shrug because Aiden never makes a fuss. I slid into the car and turned the key. The engine groaned, then started with a reluctant rumble. Clara took a step back. I rolled the window down an inch. "Tell Mom I'll call her after New Year's. Or maybe I won't. Depends if she wants to talk. Or just ask for help again." She opened her mouth, but I didn't wait for the reply. I rolled the window up and pulled away, tires crunching over frozen gravel. In the rearview mirror, I saw her standing there, hugging her arms, her figure slowly swallowed by the falling snow. I didn't cry. I didn't blast music. I just drove. The streets were mostly empty, the world hushed under the weight of the holiday. Every light I passed shimmered like a question. What now? I didn't know exactly. I hadn't planned to walk out. I hadn't expected it to hurt and free me all at once. But as I reached the edge of town, I realized I had somewhere to go. A small cabin I'd been quietly renting an hour out. No one in the family knew about it. I'd been furnishing it little by little, saving it for someday. It had heat, a stocked pantry, a fireplace, and silence. I parked outside, stepped in, and for the first time in years, I felt weightless. I lit the fire, brewed some tea, and pulled the envelopes out of the bag one by one, stacking them on the coffee table. All that generosity, redirected now. Maybe I'd donate them to a shelter tomorrow. Or maybe I'd use them to build something, just for me. For once. But just as I was about to settle in, my phone lit up. One missed call. Then 5. Then 12. My aunt. My mom. My uncle. Even Luke. And then a voicemail. I tapped play. It was my mom's voice, sharp with panic. Aiden, listen, that rent you mentioned? You didn't cancel anything yet, did you? Because we're behind already, and the landlord, he's threatening. Please call me. We can fix this. I stared at the screen, my thumb hovering over the red decline button. I didn't press anything, just sat there in the glow of the fireplace, my phone screen dimming in my palm. The logs crackled softly behind me, casting long shadows across the cabin walls. For a moment, I closed my eyes and let the heat settle into my skin, trying to let that voicemail roll off my back like water. But it clung to me. Behind already. Of course they were. I'd been paying my aunt's rent for nearly a year. My mom had begged me to step in when her job situation got complicated. I never asked for details. I didn't need to. It was always the same script. I'd wire the money. They'd sigh in relief, and nobody would mention it again. Until they needed more. But this time felt different. Not because they needed help again. That was old news. No, what stuck with me was her tone. It wasn't guilt or embarrassment. It was expectation. A subtle panic. Yes, but beneath it was a kind of certainty. That I would fix it. That I always would. I tossed the phone onto the couch beside me and leaned forward, elbows on knees. The envelopes were still sitting on the coffee table, neatly stacked, red ribbons shining in the firelight. They looked out of place in this quiet room. Out of place in my life, now? I had thought those envelopes would bring joy, that giving them would finally make me feel included, appreciated. But what they really represented was how much of myself I'd poured into a family that saw my effort as obligation, not love. I rubbed my eyes and stood, pacing across the wood floor, the old boards creaking under my socks. I stopped at the small window and looked out. The snow had stopped falling. Everything was still, peaceful. I'd forgotten what that felt like. Then the phone buzzed again. This time, it was Luke. A text. Hey, I know things got weird. Can we talk? I didn't reply. 5 minutes later, another buzz. My cousin Leah. Did you really cancel the payments? Aunt Jay's freaking out. Then, can you just call me so we can sort this out? You're being kind of dramatic. I let out a breath, half laugh, half scoff. Dramatic. That's what they called it now? I walked back over to the couch and picked up my phone again, scrolling through message after message. Some were pleading. Some were snide. One from my mom simply said, "We need to talk. This isn't like you." And she was right. It wasn't. But that was the point. I thought about Christmas mornings past. All the times I'd stayed up late wrapping gifts, or cooking when no one else would, or quietly footing bills so someone else could save face. I'd always convinced myself that love meant sacrifice. That if I just kept giving, eventually I'd be seen. But now I saw them. I went into the kitchen and grabbed a pen and notepad from the drawer. Sat down at the table and started writing. Not to them. Not yet. To myself. A list. Things I've paid for without thanks. Clara's tuition, 2 semesters. Luke's car repairs, X3. Aunt Janine's rent, 10 months. Mom's credit card balance last spring. Family reunion Airbnb. Dad's overdue medical bill. Christmas dinner groceries every year since I was 21. I paused when the list hit the bottom of the page. My stomach tightened. This wasn't generosity anymore. It was servitude dressed up as love. I stood, walked to the fire, and tossed the list in. It curled into ash instantly. Just then, the phone buzzed one more time, a video call. From Mom. I stared at it, heart thudding. Let it ring. And ring. Then, finally, I answered. But I didn't say a word. I just stared into the camera. My mom's face appeared, flushed, frantic, wrapped in a knit shawl like she'd just run outside. Aiden, thank God, she said. We didn't mean for things to get so out of hand. We were counting on you. You know how tight things are. I stayed silent. You've always been the one we could rely on, she added, a soft, almost accusatory lilt in her voice. You don't understand what it's like for the rest of us. You're successful now. You are comfortable. I was comfortable, I finally said, my voice low and calm. Until I realized everyone I thought loved me was just keeping me around like a backup plan. She blinked. That's not fair. No, I said. What's not fair is paying for your sister's rent, your daughter's education, your son's toys, your groceries, and getting a used mug in return. What's not fair is never being invited to be part of the family, unless it's to bail you all out. She went quiet. Then, so what? You're cutting us off? Just like that. I looked her in the eye, and that's when I told her, I'm done being the safety net. Her mouth parted slightly, like she hadn't expected me to actually say it. She blinked, and then the excuses started flowing. We've just been under so much pressure this year, Aiden. You know how hard it's been. The economy, your aunt's health, your brother's job situation. I held up a hand. I know. I really do. But the thing is, Mom, it's always something. Every year. Every holiday. Every phone call. And you've never once asked if I'm okay. If I need anything. You just assume I'll carry the weight. That's not true, she said, almost reflexively. Isn't it? I asked. When was the last time you called just to talk? Just to check in on me, not on my bank account? When was the last time anyone did? Her face tightened. We love you. Of course we do. You love what I do for you. That's not the same thing. She shook her head. I think you're being cruel. We're family. And I think you're confusing love with access. I said, my voice firm but calm. And access has been revoked. There was silence on the other end. Just the faint sound of wind through the trees outside her house. She didn't hang up. She didn't say anything. She just stared at me, like she didn't recognize the person speaking. And in a way, she didn't. Because I had spent years training them all to treat me this way. By never saying no. By always stepping in. By smiling through the disappointment. I had let them build a version of me that existed solely to serve them. And they believed in that version so long. They didn't know what to do now that he was gone. I'm not doing this to punish you, I said. But I am doing this for me. She opened her mouth, maybe to argue, maybe to beg. I didn't give her the chance. I ended the call. And then I turned off the phone. For the first time in years, I didn't feel the immediate weight of guilt pressing down on me. No tight knot in my stomach. No voice in the back of my head whispering that I was being selfish. Just stillness. A clean silence that didn't demand anything from me. I turned back to the fire. The cabin was warm now, glowing. I walked over to the coffee table and picked up the envelopes. One by one, I untied the ribbons and opened them. Thick stacks of hundreds, thousands of dollars, ready to be handed out like peace offerings. But not anymore. Instead of throwing them away, I did something else. I relabeled each envelope with names that had nothing to do with my family. Names of local organizations I'd researched weeks ago, a women's shelter in town, a food pantry, a youth mentorship program that needed laptops. I hadn't been sure before, but now I was. That night, I wrote out handwritten notes and slid them into the envelopes with the cash. I addressed the letters not to the directors or managers, but to the people receiving the help, strangers I would never meet. I didn't want credit. I just wanted the money to do something good for once. The next morning, Christmas Day, I drove into town early. The streets were still quiet, dusted with snow, the sun barely peeking over the rooftops. I slipped the envelopes into mail slots and drop boxes, my breath misting in the cold. At the last stop, the shelter, a woman in a long coat was sweeping the sidewalk. She looked up and smiled at me, the kind of simple, genuine smile that felt rare. "Merry Christmas," she said. "Merry Christmas," I replied. When I got back to the cabin, I made breakfast. Eggs, toast, coffee. I sat by the fire and read a book I hadn't had time for in months. No noise. No chaos. No obligations. Just peace. But of course, the silence didn't last forever. 2 days later, I checked my email for the first time since the walkout. There were over 40 new messages. Some from family. Some from unknown addresses, forwarded voicemails, even a couple of messages from numbers I didn't recognize. Word had gotten around. I ignored most of them, but one stood out. It was from my cousin Leah. The subject line was simple. "I'm sorry." I clicked it. "Aiden, I didn't know what was going on. I knew you helped sometimes, but I didn't realize how much. I think we all just assumed you were fine, that it didn't cost you anything. That was wrong. I'm not writing to ask you for anything. I just wanted to say thank you for everything you did do, and I'm sorry for not seeing you before now. If you ever want to talk, I'm here." No strings. Leah. I stared at the message for a while. It didn't undo anything. It didn't erase the years of being overlooked or used. But it was something. A small sign that maybe, just maybe, someone had finally looked past what I gave and saw me. I didn't reply right away. I wasn't ready. And I didn't owe anyone my time anymore, not on demand. But I saved the email. Days passed. New Year's came and went. I didn't get the usual group call at midnight. No blurry video of fireworks from someone's backyard. It was strangely quiet. And I loved it. By mid-January, I'd made arrangements to cut off every recurring payment I'd set up for family members. Bank accounts were frozen. Auto pays canceled. When I called the landlord covering my aunt's apartment, I was polite but firm. I'm no longer responsible. Any questions can be directed to her. He didn't argue. He just updated the file. That week, the calls started again. Not just from my aunt, but from my mom, Luke, even my dad, who rarely called anyone. Each one went to voicemail. On a Thursday afternoon, I walked into a local volunteer center and signed up to mentor teenagers interested in technology. I had always wanted to give back in a way that meant something, not just handing over money, but actually showing up. My first mentee was a 16-year-old named Bryson. Smart kid, quiet like I was at that age. In our second meeting, he asked why I was doing this. I shrugged. Because someone should. He grinned. You're not like most people. For the first time in a long time, I smiled without faking it. Neither are you, I said. Weeks passed. Then a month. The calls trickled off. A few bitter texts slipped in. But mostly, the silence held. Until Valentine's Day. A single card came in the mail. No return address. Just a Hallmark envelope with glittery hearts. Inside, a note written in my mom's handwriting. Aiden, I'm sorry. Not because you're gone, but because I didn't see what I was doing until you left. I don't expect you to forgive me, but I want you to know I'm trying to be better. Not for what I lost, but for what I could still become. I folded the card slowly, set it on the mantel. I didn't know if she meant it. I didn't know if she'd change. But for the first time, it didn't matter. Because I had. I wasn't the backup plan anymore. I was living my life, finally, on my own terms. And the next Christmas? I didn't go back. I spent it in that same quiet cabin, wrapped in a soft blanket by the fire, drinking hot cocoa from the same chipped mug they once re-gifted me. Not out of spite, but because it reminded me of who I used to be and how far I'd come.